And so the simple living truth is that freedom can only be found living in the sanctity of your own heart. That freedom can only be known when we know the divine wholeness that we are in truth. That the whole human experience is essentially that something is missing. And what is missing is the deep known connection to the divine. Without connection and knowing of the divine, there will always be misery, there will always be suffering. Separation is suffering, and separation is separation from the divine, from divine wholeness, from that to which all beings belong, the one simple being. That if we do not find the connection to the divine, then there will be a sense that something is missing or lacking. And what is missing or lacking is the connection to the divine, the knowing of the divine. It does not matter which way we come to that or which kind of words we use for that divine. The words are irrelevant. It's about the connection, and the connection is in the resonance of being. The connection is in presence. Connection is in stillness. Essentially, we could say the presence, simple presence, is the divine. Silent stillness is the divine. What is the divine? The divine is wholeness. The divine is simple purity, that which is undivided, unfragmented, untainted. And you are that. You are that. It is simple thoughts that create a sense of barrier or limitation. And yet it is so habituated to move in the realm of thought. It is so habituated to go towards thought and have the attention identified with thoughts. When attention is identified with thoughts, there is separation, a sense of separation, because in truth, there is, of course, no separation. But the sense of separation is created when the attention is identified with thought. This truth is for everyone. This truth is for all beings. No one is left out of this gracious truth because it is the true nature of all beings. The play of misery of the human condition is only happening in the mind, where the mind is identified with thought and cycling within its own thinking process, where attention is identified with thought and cycling in its own thinking process. There will always be misery. There will always be a sense of separation, because in this kind of cycling, the connection to what is true, the divine, to wholeness, is being overlooked, is being pushed aside. When the connection to the divine is being pushed aside, then there will be a sense of lack and a sense of misery. And so the habit that has been learned has been to look to fill that sense of lack in the worldly, in things, in people, in experiences. But things, people, relationships, experiences are just more thinking fodder. And wholeness, divine wholeness, cannot be found in what is fragmented. So when we look in what is fragmented, people that are in separation or believe in separation, relationships that are karmic and challenging, experiences that come and go, objects that come and go, that are temporary and transient. If we look to the temporary and transient for wholeness, we will always be disappointed. What we can be absolutely sure of is the temporary transient will always change. So why are we so surprised and disappointed when things change? It is one of life's simple guarantees that the temporary and transient will change. Things will come and go. Beings will die, bodies will be dropped, relationships will change. Environments, homes will change, jobs will change. Experience will always change. We cannot put all of our trust in the moving, changing and expect that it will fulfill our desire that it stays the same as we want it. We have to ground in a recognition that we will always be disappointed, that we are constantly within the world of separation and the mind. We're constantly setting ourselves up for disappointment. When the truth of the heart is longing for wholeness, longing for freedom, longing for a love that never leaves, longing for the unconditional flow of life and grace. It does not matter what we imagine we are longing for. It does not matter the words that we use for that. But all beings are in a natural momentum to find freedom. And the great misunderstanding that the majority of humans are initiated into because parents and guardians are in separation and karma is playing, we are initiated into the habit to look externally. We're initiated into the great misunderstanding. So there is an innocence in that, because there has been a flow within the play of life where concealment has been very much on the surface of life. Delusion has been and still is very much on the surface of life. So we have been initiated into delusion, and yet the incredible grace when there is a dawning in the life that starts to have a sense that there is more to this life. When we have a sense that there is more to this life, it is in a way the initial awakening. It is incredible grace to have a sense that there is more to this life than just moving through the cycles of suffering. Because there is more to this life. My goodness, great glory. There is so much more to this life. But it cannot be found in the worldly. It cannot be found in things and people and relationships and experiences that are temporary and transient. All there is to this life is unconditional flow and great glory. Freedom, indeed, is right here. And when we have even an inkling of this, it is because the seed of awakening has cracked open and we have sprung a leak in the illusion. We have sprung a leak in the illusion, and the great delusion is starting to go down. Now the mind says, no, let's try more experiences, more more things, more relationships, more things to try to, let's try and puff that illusion back up again. Let's try to breathe more delusional life back into the great dream and make it a good dream. But when the leak starts to come, it is because the bubble has been burst by the divine. And what is happening is that the great illusion is starting to dissolve into itself. It is such incredible grace when the seed of awakening cracks open and we have some kind of sense that there is more to this life. And when we are habituated to the glory, it is so normal that life is divine and free and incredible and shining and love-drenched. It's just the way things are. But when we are used to cycling in misery, we cannot even imagine the glory and the wholeness that we are. So we speak about this in a very ordinary way, because it is ordinary to be divine. It is so incredibly ordinary to be divine, because it is natural. It is the simple truth of who we are, of who we all are. That this is not reserved for any one in particular. And yet, of course, the seed has to have cracked open for us to even be able to perceive and have a sense that there is more to this life. But when we have a sense that there is more to this life, it is to follow that sense, that longing, that pull for whatever we imagine it is, but to follow it, because it is the call of freedom. It is the call of the divine, and it is the call into a glorious knowing of what is true that ends suffering. It ends the illusion of separation. It doesn't mean that challenge doesn't appear, but it's not seen as challenge. It's seen differently. It's met differently. And in a way, the work that we speak of as a way of receiving life, as the great openness, it is the most incredible work. It's intense work to undo the habits that want to identify with the mind. And that is why the seed of awakening has to be cracked open, and the momentum to know this truth has to be awakened in us. The first seed cracking open and this sense of an awakening is the awakening of the longing for something more, whether it's for the divine or whether it is just to end suffering. Life will play the way that it plays in order to bring us to a sense of being able to connect in with the possibility that there's something more. And often, curiously, it will bring us to our knees, where we are at a point where we are so disappointed, so disillusioned, and living with so much anxiety and stress and fear, maybe poor health, maybe just different kinds of fears, or a relationship ends, or we lose someone precious. It will normally be in these kind of life circumstances that in the despair and devastation that we are pulled to start asking the deeper questions. But it doesn't have to be that way. It often will be that way, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can follow the signs. We can follow the light that is calling us to our true essence nature at any point in the life. All it takes is for that seed to crack open and for the fire, the spark, the light of the divine inside us to be felt, because the longing is initiated by the spark of the divine within. It is initiated by a sense that there is something more. And that sense that there is something more is initiated by the spark of the divine. It's somehow that we are subtly perceiving the divine, whether we call that something more, whether we are drawn to some kind of religious way or spiritual way or quantum physical way. It doesn't really matter how we're drawn to it. But what we have to know is that what we are drawn to through any of these means is the same truth. What we also have to know is that often the means that draws us in is not the means to bring us to freedom. It will be some kind of spiritual experience. At least in the earlier stages, we will be pulled into spiritual experiences because we will seek within experience the grace of who we are. It is when that perception and the pointing to the inner journey, let's say, that the inner path, the path into your own heart and into the sanctity of your own divine nature. At some point when this is pointed out, and when the subtle perception can perceive it, it ignites. It ignites that spark of the divine inside that has been seeking in all these different ways. And it brings the recognition that this spark is what I am. This spark is in the silent presence of my own being. The spark of the divine is my own heart. It is my own infinity, my own freedom. And it is just to follow what I am in presence, in silence, in stillness, the subtle perception to follow this truth and not the distractions in the external is ignited. And so this is grace indeed. And of course, a mind cannot believe these words. A mind cannot understand these words. The mind will always find some kind of way of pushing away, judging, having an opinion, right? But when that subtle perception of the divine within you is enlivened and has been recognized, then these words will ignite and illuminate and really bring forward that longing. Because these words are that truth. They are arising out of that truth, carrying the resonance of that truth in order to capture the attention and bring the attention back to the source, the divine. Bring the attention back into true connection and restore the connection with divine wholeness, with the simple being. So as we speak, none of the words matter. It's about the resonance, and it's about the recognition of the resonance, and that the recognition is your own presence, that where there's recognition, it's not the mind recognizing, it is your own presence of being, enlivened and magnetically drawn in an attunement with itself. The only way out of the misery of the human condition and that sense that something is missing or lacking is to find the wholeness that you are. Cannot find that wholeness in anyone in the world. So just recognize now that any idea that that is possible will end in disappointment. It cannot not end in disappointment. Let us be really honest and say most very deep and profound long-term friendships and relationships are, in the truest, deepest heart, somewhat disappointing, whether we have the courage to actually admit that because we feel like we might be betraying some being that is very dear to us. But we will never, ever find divine wholeness within a relationship where there is any sense of separation. We will find wholeness in relationships when we know the wholeness that we are in our own heart, because we don't fear losing. We're not looking for completion in others, and we cannot be disappointed in others. We stop blaming others and expecting others to fulfill something that we sense is lacking in ourselves. When we find wholeness in our own true nature, we see only that wholeness in all beings, and we are not looking to the external to fulfill us. And yet we find then such revelation and love and gorgeousness in connections, in friendships, companionships, relationships, because there is a freedom in relating. There is a deep companionship, which is the companionship of heart. It is the meeting in the oneness, the love. And that can only happen when there is an intimacy with yourself. So it is not to betray the beauty of our relationships and all of the ways that they bring so much nourishment and joy, but it is to know that they will always, always be disappointing if there is any sense of separation or ego patterning or karma playing through. Will always, always be moving to enliven the samskaras in order to bring them forward. And this kind of relationship will always be disappointing if we are hoping, expecting to find some kind of intimacy or fulfillment, or if we are expecting to be seen, right? We can be so disappointed in life that nobody sees us, whether it's our friends or partners or parents or siblings. It doesn't matter. Our work companions or bosses, we will never ever be seen or understood. And the reason that reflection comes is because if you do not understand yourself, you cannot make a reflection of being understood. You cannot create a reflection of wholeness if you feel like there's something lacking in you, right? So we're speaking very directly here and very openly, because let's be honest about how disappointing the human experience is. Let's smile at how greatly disappointing the human conditioned experience is, and how there is such insanity, how we keep expecting that it's going to show up and bear fruit and bring us the gold of divine glory, and how we're constantly disappointed when it doesn't, that we can fall in love with anyone and anything, but until we know love, we will always be disappointed, because it will always change. The play will always change. And if we are looking for some kind of gain in the play, if we have expectations of the play, we can only be disappointed. How could we not? How could we not? If we are seeking fullness in the fragmented, because we feel like something is missing within us and we don't know the full wholeness of our true nature, then it will be a self-fulfilling prophecy that the lack, the sense of lack, the sense of being unseen, the sense of something missing, the sense of having expectation, it will always come crashing in as a wave of reflection. Do we dare to be disappointed again? Do we dare to be surprised that people disappoint us? Do we dare one more time to be disappointed when beings that are being moved in the belief in separation and egocentric patterning, in protection, when beings that are moving from protection cannot give us what we imagine that we want them to give, when beings that are suffering themselves cannot take our suffering away, right? It is to just have such an illuminated openness about the play in the human condition. And as we have an illumined openness about the human condition, let us notice, great glory, where are we seeing that from? Where are we being aware from? Where are we watching from? We are watching from the zoomed out perspective. We're seeing the play, the staged play. Now, when that play is the illusion of separation, it will constantly feel like being a victim and being tossed around in that play. When we are habituated because we learned to listen to the mind, when we're habituated listening to the mind and being tossed around, feeling like a victim, feeling anxious and afraid and stressed because we're putting all of our bets on the next possible pleasant experience, right? What a way to live. What insanity, right? Another part of the human condition is that we fear insanity, but the human condition itself is the insanity. Sanity is only found in the true essence nature, where we are not being ruled by the mind. A single thought that brings a sense of identification with the body-mind is insanity. We can cure insanity in the recognition that the true nature is the presence of this moment, that there is a felt sense of being the presence that is aware of the play, aware of the character, aware of the thoughts, aware of the body, sensations and tensions, aware of all that is moving and changing. And the felt sense of being this presence is simple and pure and awake. Awake to a deeper truth, a simple truth, that the felt sense of being here now is freedom, is peaceful. Where there are no thoughts, there is peace. There is no fear. There are no opposites. That we come to the sense of just being the presence that is silent, still, and free. Here there is wholeness. Cannot find that wholeness with the mind saying, am I finding wholeness? Can only find wholeness in the felt sense of just really dropping into the direct experience of the peace, the calm, the openness of just being here. That underneath the moving, changing play, as if to be in the background, is a presence that is still and silent. And when attention drops into the stillness and notices the stillness, and notices the deep, peaceful silence, notices that here there is the capacity to witness the moving, changing, remembering this capacity to watch the thoughts that come and go, and recognize, if I am watching the thoughts, then I am not the thoughts. If I am watching the body, then I am not the body. It is to recognize that the witness has a zoomed out perspective, and the zoomed out perspective is the start of freedom. That the witnessing itself is immediately a sanctuary. Just to be able to witness is a sanctuary that can always be found, a spaciousness from the insanity of the mind, to watch the mind, to be aware of the mind. It brings immediate peace. Now, of course, the habit is to go back in to the ring with the lion, right? With the tiger. It's to get right back in again. The mind, another thought will come. And the habit is just to go right back in and start thinking, start tussling with the tiger, right? Before you know it, you will be swallowed into the mind's meanderings. It is only through the superpower of awareness and witnessing that we find the open door of freedom that releases us from the maze of the mind. To run around in the maze of the mind is to run around in a maze that has no way out. You cannot find your way out of the mind through the mind. The only subtle way that is possible is through inquiry. Inquiry uses the mind to find the way to the source. Now, most beings don't have the maturity to inquire and really find the way out, because it takes a great maturity for true inquiry to actually bring us to the source. And of course, it will take a maturity where the consciousness is ready to perceive something bigger than the maze of the mind. So the kind of inquiry that says, who am I, is actually an incredibly mature practice. To ask, who is this I? Where this can bring us to freedom is to use the thought, what is this I? It is to come to the sense of I, which brings us to presence. I am. What is this I? Is when it brings us to presence, because presence is the only way out of the maze of the mind. If we are thinking, well, who am I? Who am I? Who are these thoughts arising to? We can just whir more into the maze of the mind, thinking that we're in some kind of inquiry. But inquiry is actually one simple thought that brings us out of the mind. True inquiry brings us to presence, and presence is the witnessing presence. So we can come to the felt sense of presence, or we can come to the sense I or I am, or the felt sense of just being, can come to the silence and the alive resonance, or the nadam, when we can recognize the alive resonance, vibration of silence. There are many subtleties, and each being will have a unique way of perceiving, and really to know the way to perceive is to know where the broader, vaster perspective is in your direct experience. It is not a one size fits all. And yet the presence, of course, is one. The being is one. The resonance of the I am presence is one. And it is to find this resonance of presence in the way that is alive and true. To come to the silence of being and the sanctity of your own heart. Come to the witness that is aware and watching. And then have the courage to keep coming back to this witness whenever there is a noticing of challenge or resistance. And really use this sanctuary, this refuge. Take refuge in the presence of being. Take refuge in the peace of your own essence nature. You do not need to belong or have a particular technique. It is to find your way into yourself, to know that you have a way to be with yourself is grace indeed. To know how to come to be the witness, because as the witness, there is spaciousness, there is a sense of the presence of being, but it is not the full sense of freedom. The witness is the first layer of spaciousness that brings a sense of being a witnessing presence. But it is really only when this witness comes to a maturity where the witness itself actually starts its own conscious inquiry in consciousness. So this is the maturity to inquire that we're speaking of, is that as the witness, as the sense of the I am presence that's watching, the witness starts to notice, well, if I am watching and I am peaceful and free of all that I am watching, then what actually am I? What am I as the witness? And when the witness turns, let's say, in awareness to be aware of itself, witnessing, where awareness turns to itself to see that it is one awareness that is aware in its kind of outer shell of the moving, changing, but in the innermost being, awareness is aware of itself. And where awareness is aware of itself is an even deeper true peace. It's the stop. It's the silence. of true simple being. And here, when the innermost being remembers, sees itself, being aware of itself, there's a remembering which wakes up the consciousness out of mind consciousness and identification, wakes up the consciousness itself to its pure nature. Consciousness itself wakes up to remember, well, what am I if I'm witnessing and watching? What am I? To be consciously awake and aware of yourself just being aware is the wake up call that brings a sense of freedom, where the knowing, oh, what I am is this presence that is free and simple and silent and still. I am not limited to being the person and the mind and the story. That there is freedom here. There is peace here. There is stillness here. And this peace, this stillness cannot be disturbed by the mind. It cannot be taken by the mind because it is always bigger, vaster, purer, simpler than the mind. The extraordinarily beautiful truth is that we are coming to simplicity. We have to be very simple to know the simple truth. The mind is complicated. It's tying itself in knots. It's tangling itself up in all of the ways that it can. When we come to be the witness, we come to a simplicity where we can see that big old tangle of the mind story, and we can feel, well, here in the felt sense, direct experience, the felt sense of presence that's witnessing. There's no tangle. There's no disturbance. There's a peaceful simplicity. The more that we directly experience this peaceful simplicity, the more that awareness wakes up and deepens into its pure consciousness. And at some point, its remembering is so illuminated that it can never be forgotten again. As it tastes and glimpses itself, it might feel like it can be forgotten, but you're never ever not yourself. And as you come to feel in direct experience this presence, perhaps you can notice, oh, this has always been here. This sanctuary of presence, of being. It's what I am. It's a part of me. It's myself. It's not at any distance from what I am. It's just the part that has no story and is not limited to the body, not pushed around like a victim to the thoughts, not a slave to the mind. But this is a part of me that's free and whole and simple. So it's in this incredible simplicity that we find the natural being, and we restore the natural connection to this truth. We restore the remembering of being to our own direct experience, where there's a sense of who you are a remembering of something very familiar, a remembering of a freedom, a remembering of a relaxation, an ease, a remembering of a lightness. And that lightness is the light. It's the simplicity, the light, the unsullied, the unentangled, uncomplicated truth of who you are. And here there is wholeness. There is wholeness, and a wholeness that is never ever, a wholeness that is never ever not whole, has never ever not been whole. Every being deserves to know this truth. Every being that believes that suffering is part of life. We're tapping into the collective now, so that's why the tears start to upwell here, because we're tapping into the collective so that we can bring this truth to the collective. Every being deserves to know this truth. Every being deserves to know the freedom of the wide open heart, because every being is this. So as we are speaking this here, the reverberation of what we are recognizing in our gathering is being brought to the collective. It's brought to the collective through the reverberation of resting in this truth, and it's brought to the collective by the consciousness. When we touch into here, the collective consciousness that believes that suffering is a part of life, that believes that misery is a part of life, that believes that disappointment is a part of life. As we open here, we bring love, we bring truth, we bring the light of wholeness to the collective, where every being has a spark inside them. There is a magical thing that can happen here, is that as we bring this spark of our knowing, right? We're not playing some kind of angelic force or moving in ways that the mind imagines. We are being in our own revelation, in our own awakeness. Only when we are resting in our own knowing do we bring this spark. And the magical thing that happens is that in the collective, where there are beings that have that subtle spark inside them, a sense they could be sitting somewhere, anywhere in the world, any time zone, feeling there must be more to this life. There must be more to this life. They might be just feeling that spark. And as we bring this upliftment of our own knowing, it will illuminate that spark where there's a readiness in the one consciousness for consciousness to perceive a little bit more light, to feel a little bit more love, a little bit more beauty, a little bit more of a spark of the divine. Here's that spark. Here's that spark that belongs to all beings. This knowing, this love, this grace belongs to all beings. And when there is a readiness in each being to subtly perceive your knowing is the reverberation that is supporting the light to be accessible for beings, right? So we're speaking this because it's so profound to recognize that our awakeness is not for someone, that in the absence of someone, awakeness is here, and yet the reverberation, the light of the awake field is for everyone. And the reverberation of living this truth in service, living as the being, it's supporting all beings in the possibility of remembering, opening to a deeper possibility. We can all remember a time where we were completely stuck in separation. Maybe there are some beings here that could even be here now or be very familiar or close, right? When you're stuck in something. But we remember a time where there was a hopelessness, a despair, a longing, and not understanding why life has to be so hard. It's this light inside all beings when there is a subtlety to open to something more, that our living this truth supports. To live this truth as no one that wants nothing, to just be the love, to be the light that is here for the upliftment of all beings. Could there be anything more profound than to bring the light that can end the delusion of human suffering, right? To be the light that doesn't collaborate with the illusion, but that moves as the light, that brings love and compassion and kindness to all of the areas that feel stuck in darkness in your own life, and where that light can be shared, not through being a do-gooder. Do-gooders do no good, not in the way that is imagined, but to be this love, to live this, to be the living of this through meeting your own challenges, through meeting your own limitations and freeing where there is limitation. This is the work. Meeting where you have resistance, meeting where you move in delusion, meeting where you can see that you are playing along with the delusion and a sense of separation, and bring light and freedom to all of the places that you can, right? That to be moving in this way is in service to the whole, because there is one whole. And when we are in the knowing of wholeness, we are in love. We are in love for the sake of loving. We are in love. And the pull is just to bring this love to every single place that does not know this love. But we have to start in our own life. We have to start in bringing love and wholeness and light and divine connection to every single part of your own life, so that your life is living freedom. Right? So what we're speaking of is the simple truth. It's about freedom. It's about freedom from suffering. It's about freedom from the misery of the collective consciousness. through living this truth so wholly as the being in your direct experience, where the sense of separation disappears into divine wholeness. And in the sense of living this divine wholeness, transmuting, every time you transmute your misery, you transmute that pattern in the collective. So the reverberations of transmutation, transmuting into divine love, all the way into being the divine love, all the way, transmuting it through your lived experience, is bringing that divine connection to the surface of life in your lived experience. And that is how we bring the light to the surface of life in support of the whole. So it is to know that our own suffering is optional. When we can come to presence and be aware, we have a sanctuary of witnessing that is spacious and open. And from here, we can drop into the being. Be aware, be aware, be aware, be aware. To be aware is the superpower. It's the true power. It is the power of the self, the power of love. It is the power of the divine. And whether we call the divine God or Ma or love or the Lord, Divine Mother, Krishna, Shiva, Ram, it does not matter. Let us not create separation in the play of words. Let us know that the divine is one, and the divine is wholeness, and the divine is a radiant light, not as an opposite to dark, but a light that illuminates the opposites of light and dark, a light that has no opposite, a light that is ever luminous, brilliant radiance, right? It's not a light that has darkness as an opposite. It's a light that knows no other. It illuminates all play of opposites, because the play of opposites is the play of the delusion. In truth, there are no opposites. The play is a play of the divine with the divine, a divine lila, a divine play. And freedom to know that it's all a play allows us the freedom to play in the play as love, play in the play in transmuting all that feels to be discordant, right? Play in the play as the flow of life. So here we are, resting in the silent, still, simple being, bringing that which can seem to be in the background right into the foreground. Can be possible to bring this into the foreground and just let it be the living foreground. That we stop pushing the divine away, that we stop pushing it away and then telling our story of hardship, that we stop collaborating with the stories, that we invite the divine right up here, right here to the surface of life, through resting in the restored connection to the divine. And we stop telling the story of suffering, and we meet the feelings that are uncomfortable. We stop projecting it to others and to the external. We stop blaming anyone. We stop our story that we are being wronged somehow. And we meet every part of ourself that wants to be seen or heard. We give ourselves the gift of being seen, of being heard. We come to a wholeness within our own direct experience, where we stop putting all of our bets and trust in the temporary and transient, and then being disappointed when change happens. That we put all our trust, all our bets with the divine. All of it, everything, right? You can't hedge your bets with the divine. It's an all or nothing kind of thing. You give it all to God, it all comes. Give it all to the divine. You grow into the divine. You grow into the remembering. You give it all to love. You come to remember that you are love. But it's not a bargaining. It's not a bargaining. It takes for the fire to be ignited and the ability to subtly perceive that carries us in and in and in to this truth, to find that the fulfillment is in the glory of our own heart, the glory of the heart that is the one infinite, unbounded heart of light.